The hypocrisy of what I'm about to see. The hypocrisy of what you think you will defend.
This is not science. This is hypocrisy.
If you know this and nobody looks into this, it reeks of the hypocrisy at the FBI and the Department of Justice.
Hypocrisy. You know what I could go through right now? I could just go through page after page after page of article after article of hypocrisy. Could you imagine if Republicans did that? Hypocrisy. And this is why I'm not a conservative. I am an anti-communist. Because this is all conservatism has been for my entire life. Taking hypocrisy, which would bother you, and trying to put your values on the communists and acting as if they give a crap about being hypocrites. They love being hypocrites. They love rubbing it in your face. Joining me now to talk about that and other things, Matt Peterson, Claremont Institute. Matt, this is all the right has been for my 41 years on the planet, man, and I can't stand it. It drives me crazy.
Yeah, I agree. I'm only a few years more than that on the planet, and it's all I've seen as well. And I think the only good news is that, here in the late Republic, a lot of us are sick and tired of it. And, it just doesn't matter, right? The problem is saying these things over and over again is not doing what needs to get done. It's meaningless.
What does need to get done?
A lot. First, we need to start with reframing the issue so we're not talking about hypocrisy at all, because it's not hypocrisy. They're just using power in order to get things done. When we look at what needs to get done, what I am really passionate about is a commercial cultural movement that moves in the opposite direction of the woke communists. And what I mean by that is something that both attacks them using existing law that's on the books, that reforms laws in order to eradicate a lot of this nonsense and to make it painful for them to operate. And then on the positive side, we actually need to know what winning looks like. Like, what tangibly are we fighting for? What way of life do we want to see instantiated in real flesh and blood in the next 10, 20 years? And for that, you need, to get investors together to buy companies to become competitors to the woke nonsense. I'd love to see, a clothing company, for instance, that, unlike Patagonia, is proud to be American and starts to compete in the same. They start to draw blood, in other words, from these woke companies. And this commercial cultural movement is really what's needed, because that will drive the politics, in my opinion.
Why does that drive the politics? I agree with you, but I think a lot of times people have a hard time separating that or understanding why this corporate filth is so damaging to the country. I argue it's the second most damaging thing the communists took over besides the education system. When they took over that corporate world, they really put us in a cultural bind.
Yeah, I think it's because that in a Republican form of government, or at least one that attempts to be Republican, public opinion is everything. And so when you talk about commerce, you're talking about culture, because everything in our culture is commercial, right? I mean, it runs such that these corporations have to make money, and they help develop and shape with products and services and advertisements and everything else the way we live our lives. And so by co-opting them from the top, they've really taken control over everything, because they will control public opinion and what's acceptable and what's not. And so we live in a really a Soviet situation, right, in which many people in their places of work cannot say what they actually believe, and the company knows that the commissar, who's really there from the government and HR, is going to enforce their will upon the company and therefore upon the rest of the country. And here's where we have to get smart about how to attack it. You have to attack them directly, politics, with law, antitrust legislation for these large behemoths that are stopping competition and running roughshod over all manner of medium-sized businesses, for instance. The civil rights laws, which sadly have been used to force all businesses to take into account race and sexual identity. They've used those laws and abused them. You got to directly attack those things politically. I'm not here to dispute that. But until we have our own commercial cultural movement of what we want, of what we find desirable, right? A broad-based movement that's looking about how we think we ought to live our lives, and our revenue goes away from these woke companies and into this other ecosystem, we will continue to lose.
Blue America. I regularly encourage people to get out of Blue America, not because I don't love New York City, not because I don't love California. I love both places. I love Oregon. I did a lot. I just have had the blast in these places, but because of the horrors, not only that are there, but that are coming for these places, Matt. And I don't think people have accepted and understood this quite yet. They're taking people's children out of their homes already in California if they don't affirm their gender. This is not the end. This is not the final form, because there is no final form of communism. It gets worse from here, and I don't think many Americans understand what's coming.
Yeah, look, I agree. And I think, I lived this, right? I mean, I moved from Pasadena, California to Dallas 2 years ago, February, and along with many other people that I know, in fact. And I followed this issue closely. I'm part of, fostering different thought on this and action. Look, the bottom line is, if you're in a one-party system where it can't be changed, there might be reasons to stay that are human. Of course, you have family, et cetera, but you can't count on those places ever changing or getting better, because structurally, I mean, take it from someone who studied political science. Okay, actually, don't trust anyone who studied anything in this society, but structurally, if you look at what they are, you just say, like, what kind of government is this? I mean, they're one-party states that are centralized control. They're not going to change anytime soon. And the trajectory that they're on is dangerous. I think a lot of people are seeing it. There's no way off that crazy train. And so what I say is, not to divide, but to save America, we need people to sort. That was always the classic American solution. You need to go to red states where you can actually, fight the communists and win. I've done it. I've seen it done. You go to a red state, it's not perfect, but you can actually fight and win. You develop new models, new ways of leading forward. And if you consolidate power and set up models in those states, you could potentially retake, the rest of the country. So I just think you don't lie to yourself if you live in blue state America. Of course, in some areas in blue state America, there are, red counties and your life might be great. I get it. This is fine. But realize you do live in, some variant of North Korea, and you have to acknowledge that fact. You're something of a missionary. You're in a place where increasingly they're going to want to attack and persecute you.
Yeah, that's a fact. Matt, tell me about Up From Conservatism. I love this title, Revitalizing the Right After a Generation of Decay. Tell me about this book.
Well, it's we have Arthur Millick to thank for it, my colleague at Claremont who runs our D.C. Center. And really what he does there is a little different than a lot of the useless conservatives that we were talking about. This book, revolutionary. Everything in it from the title on out is provocative, and in different areas of policy, you'll find various thinkers and doers talking about what should be done differently. Exactly the opposite of the sort of thing we were talking about earlier. Not just sitting around and calling the left hypocrites, but what really needs to be done and how should we think radically differently in a bold new way on a number of fronts if we're going to move forward and actually win this thing.
Thank you, Matt. I appreciate you, brother. Keep going. I am rooting for you, in your corner big time.
Are you tired of watching your beloved nation fall prey to the insidious grip of communism? The Anti-Communist Manifesto by Jesse Kelly is the ultimate guide to fighting back against this destructive force. Discover the shocking truth about communism infiltrating our education system, corporations, and even environmental movements. Unmask the true agenda behind groups like Antifa and Black Lives Matter, and learn how to protect the United States from the most malicious enemy. With extensive documentation of past atrocities, you'll see the undeniable danger posed by this ideology. Arm yourself with knowledge and join the fight to preserve the American way of life. The Anti-Communist Manifesto, a new must-read book from Jesse Kelly. Get your copy today at jessekellybook.com or wherever books are sold.